attention to the Open Meetings Act posted here in the City Council chambers. If you now please join me in rising for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Granquist,
Here.
Arns,
Here.
Merrill,
Here.
Webelhouse,
Here.
Murin,
Here.
Jackson,
Here.
Clausen,
Here.
Hildebrand.
Here.
Okay, with that, I would look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So
Your Honor, Counsel, I'll be abstaining.
Your Honor, I'll be abstaining due to item 15.
Anyone else? All right. Okay.
Second the motion.
Second. Motion and second. If no discussion, please vote.
Voting in the affirmative, Granquist, Arns, Merrill, Murin, Jackson, Hildebrand. Abstaining from the vote, Webelhouse and Clausen. Motion carries.
Okay, I would then look for a motion to approve the full agenda with one change. We have a request to move item number 29 to the top of the regular agenda.
Make a motion to approve the regular agenda with item 29. Second.
Motion and second. If no discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Motion carries.
All right, that takes us to item number 26 on the council agenda under special presentations. Tonight we have a proclamation declaring August 1st through 7th, 2021 as Rotary Week. I will read the proclamation, which reads, whereas the Norfolk Rotary Club has had an impact on the citizens of Norfolk as well as throughout the world for the past 101 years, through various projects, both locally and internationally. And whereas the Norfolk Rotary Club has provided free music in the park concerts to the public for the past 10 years. And whereas the Norfolk Rotary Club has had a beneficial influence on the citizens of Norfolk. Now, therefore, I, Josh Boning, Mayor of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, along with the Norfolk City Council, do hereby proclaim August 1st through 7th, 2021 as Rotary Week in the City of Norfolk, and extend gratitude to the Norfolk Rotary Club for the impact they have had on our community. And I think we have a couple people here to accept the proclamation, so we'd welcome you forward, Christine. You guys want to say a few words about Rotary? Put you on the spot, huh? It is Rotary Week after all.
That's right. I really want to thank the city because without the city's help, we wouldn't be able to have our Music in the Park programs. And the Parks Department has been really great in working with us. They make the park look so pretty, and they're always prepared and ready for us. They're very helpful. They give us calls back when we need it. The city police department helps us with the cones, and they help us with parking, and the city fire department has helped us with emergency planning. So we've been really grateful for all of that help, and it has helped us raise a lot of money in the last 10 years. Probably more than what you'll know. So,
Yeah. Well,
and
thank you, Christine.
without your help, we wouldn't have that to get and then to give back to the community.
Thank you
as well.
both for being here tonight. Thank you to what Rotary has done for the community over the last several decades, as was mentioned, for 100 years plus history in the community, and beyond Music in the Park, which has become a very strong tradition here and brings thousands of people into Norfolk on a regular basis during the summers. You guys have done a lot of good throughout the community, especially geared towards youth and scholarship. So we appreciate your ongoing commitment to community service. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, with that, it takes us to our regular agenda, and we have moved up item number 29, so I would look for a motion to consider approval of an agreement with BKD LLP to audit the city's financial statements for the fiscal years ending September 30th, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025. And to kick off the discussion on this and give us some background, Randy Gates, our city finance officer.
Yes, Your Honor. On May 17th, the council approved sending out requests for proposal to audit the city's financial statements for the next 5 years. This also includes the Northeast Nebraska Solid Waste Coalition, since we keep their bucks, and it's easiest if we have one auditor do both audits. Staff recommends that the city and coalition audits be awarded, like I said, to the same firm, and we're recommending BKD be awarded the audit. 3 proposals were received. Bergen KVD was the low bid, and they were substantially the low bid, but we did not interview Bergen KVD. They had glaring error in their proposal. Our fiscal year end they got wrong, and also Bergen KVD was hired by Sarpy County to do some work related to processes in their accounting department. They were having problems. After Bergen KVD did that work, the Auditor of Public Accountants did an audit report and was critical of some of the work performed by Bergen KVD. So we did not feel it was worth interviewing them. Hayes and Associates bid was slightly lower than BKD's bid, but they've been our auditor for 8 years. They've done a good job, but BKD has more experience with certificate of achievement clients, has more landfill experience. They're a national firm. They provide a lot of continuing education for cities. They have offered that to the city of Norfolk for free, even though we weren't a client. We've taken advantage of several of those. So great educational opportunities, and BKD, I think, will have fresh eyes that they can put on the city's financial processes, which I think is good every once in a while to have fresh eyes put on the city's finances, and they can perhaps come up with some ideas that Hayes hasn't. So anyway, staff's recommending BKD. Amy Schreck from BKD's here tonight. If you have any questions, she'd be happy to answer them along with myself.
Okay, thank you, Randy. Appreciate that explanation of the process to get where we are. It sounds like this decision's been pretty heavily vetted. Are there any questions that the council might have about it or for the firm that was chosen? Might let you off the hook pretty easy tonight. Okay, is there any further discussion? Oh, did we not do that?
No.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion and second discussion. I could have sworn I did that. I'm sorry. So at this point, Randy, with that background, any further discussion or questions from the council, or any questions of the firm who's represented here tonight? Okay. If not, roll call, please. Please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Okay. That moves us to item number 27. And at this point, I will look for a motion to consider approval of the 2019 Norfolk Boundary Study, August 2nd, 2021 update.
I'll make a motion for consideration of approval.
Motion and second. And for background on this and to kick off the discussion, we'll hear from Steve Ramus, Public Works Director.
Mayor and Council, what you have before you is an update to a study that was previously presented to Council and accepted back on 12/2 of 2019. Subsequent to that, there's been plenty of opportunity for city staff and economic development to engage with the consultant. And over that time period, it became evident that there was a few more parcels that fit the annexation envelope or statutes. And so we re-engaged Olson's Associates to update that boundary study, and that is what's presented to you here today for acceptance and conversation. Olson is here. Joe Johnson was the consultant that led that effort for us over the last 4 years or so. And so he comes to us, as a consultant, our consultant on this project, but he also, within his career, has had a background as a city administrator and has worked with annexations in that capacity as well. So he's very well versed in what we're presenting to you here for acceptance, and then subsequent conversation in the next agenda item for an intent resolution for annexation. So Joe, why don't you come forward, go ahead and sign in. And what I'll do...
Steve, I might add here on this, on consideration of approval of the updated boundary study, maybe Joe, just give a brief explanation as to why it was updated, and then on the next item we can go through the whys and hows of the annexation process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me back and presenting on the updated 2021 updated version of a 19 project that we did. So we started the original boundary study back in 18. Took a little under a year to complete and to move through the process. And the reason that we accept this is just a study. So you will find other communities throughout the state, they don't go to this in depth, exploring potential growth of their community and size. So I applaud the city of Norfolk for taking that step and gaining additional information and insight into potential boundary increases. So the 2022 updates were kept consistent with the 19, so that's important. I didn't update all the numbers in the study. I didn't redo the formulas or the method. I just simply applied the 18, 19 methods to this and used 18 and 19 information to update this. So it keeps it consistent across the boundary study without having to do a whole new study and that added cost. So areas that were considered for this go around were 1.5.1, which is generally private land west of Norfolk on 275. Area 4.1, roughly the Divots area west of Norfolk. Area 4.2, city community owned property on west of Norfolk on 275. And then 4.3, generally the area around the Norfolk Regional Airport area, just south of town. So those are the areas. Again, formulas, methods were all kept consistent, so everything flows equally across the study. So, any questions? I can give an update on methodologies and things like that we covered, a year and a half ago if we want. But
I think that probably fits best with the next item, but I just for the sake of everyone knowing what we're looking at here, so and how the process occurred. You've been engaged with the city of Norfolk for how long now? Almost 3 years?
Yeah.
Well, on this project,
yes, yep.
Almost 3 years to do the analysis for an annexation study. Once we moved through some of the stages of that process, the council gave direction to include some other parcels that weren't included with the initial plan, right? And so we have, I believe, already approved a version of a boundary study.
So
and this is accepted it. This is an update with those new areas included.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what we're doing right now. In the next item before us, we will actually consider the resolution that states the desire of the council to move forward with the annexation, the process.
That's correct, Mayor. This is just the acceptance item for the updated study.
Okay.
Yep.
So,
Just one thing to add, Mayor. So it's a boundary study because then annexation is a process according to state statute. So this is not annexation study. It's just simply a boundary study. The annexations, what the mayor and city council does around this table.
so what's before us right now is the updated boundary study. Are there any questions or comments on that item? Okay, hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
And now in item number 28, I will entertain a motion to consider resolution number 2021-28, stating the city's desire to consider the annexation of land as noted in the attached annexation study and approving the plan for extending city services to said land and establishing September 7th, 2021 as the date for a public hearing to consider said annexation.
I'll
Your
offer
Honor,
for
I will
consideration
be
ordinance number
abstaining.
2021-28.
Your Honor, I will be abstaining because I have property in this area.
I'll also be abstaining. Second.
Okay, motion and second. Okay. Steve, if you'd like to kick this off with further background on the annexation process.
Mayor and council, I brought up on your screens just a little bit of history, and I realize and apologize to the audience that you can't read this, but the intent here isn't so much that you read each of these line items, but it's really just to show you the series of events, or the fact that we've been through several events, meetings, so forth, regards to the study and potential annexation. Here, we actually went and approved Olson's contract back in October 2nd of 2017, so just a couple months, and it'll be 4 years. After that, we've had the draft study was presented to us for review and comment. Went back through some additions on that, and then again, that was finally brought to us in December 2nd of 19 for approval. Kind of following that, as I mentioned, there's some other conversations, and we as a city wanted to bring in our wellhead area and bring in the airport, so we added those, and then subsequent to that, we also brought in area 1.5.1, which is kind of some currently undeveloped land between 25th Street and 37th, south of Highway 275. As a function of that, and those edits, that's kind of been ongoing for about the last 6 months. We reached kind of the final draft of the study, brought that to you. Now then becomes the question of annexation. And so we've been working here for the last 2 or 3 months preparing for the annexation. And as pointed out here, I think by the mayor, it was back in April of this year. Let me look here to be exact. It was an economic subcommittee back in 4-5 where we discussed the various areas for potential annexation. 519, some follow-up, and then received go ahead or approval from council subcommittee to go ahead and start the process for annexation. Where we are today, so that kind of gets us up to where we are today here towards the end of July, sitting down here at August 2nd with the intent resolution. I bring up now before you what this process will look like as we move forward from here. So today we have the intent resolution before you, assuming that that gets approved. The next process would be to send out letters for the public hearing at Planning Commission. Those letters would go out on 8/4. and they're sent to all landowners. And I don't have an exact parcel count here, but we're in the range of 450 parcels. And then the city has a few of those with our wellhead protection area and airport. So those would be mailed out to the landowners here on 8/4 in anticipation of a planning commission public hearing on 8/17. Then following that, on 8/25, public hearing notices would be sent to the newspaper and the landowners for the 9/7 city council meeting. There would be a public hearing on 9/7 at council, followed by the first reading of the annexation ordinance. Second reading would be on 9/20, and the third reading would be on 10/4. Any questions on the schedule moving forward from here?
Hey, Steve, I just wanted to note on the public notice part of this that we're not legally required to send that letter to each property owner, correct?
There is a section of state statute that says by regular U.S. mail, you will send information stating the public hearing.
So it is
date.
legally required. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wanted to note that part of the process. Okay. So beyond the public notice in local media, each landowner, property owner affected in the annexation area will be notified by U.S. mail as well.
That's correct. So that's a little bit of background, and then kind of the schedule looking forward for the annexation. Right now there are 25, and so what we've put out as a function of the intent resolution is the information required by state statutes. We added some additional exhibits to the back of that. So the state statutes require us to send out kind of all that legal description for each of those areas. Because this is fairly large, we didn't do legal descriptions by parcel. We combined parcels into larger areas and then did a meets and bounds description around those areas. And so that's the way the intent resolution is set up. On the back of the resolution then are 4 exhibits. One of the exhibits is a map. This map is again required by state statutes. It shows our existing boundary in the kind of the yellowy area, and then in the areas that would be proposed for annexation, those show up in a dark gray, and you can see the before and after footprint. The smaller numbers on there, those numbers represent the areas that we've subdivided the annexation into. And then within the resolution, you can find the meets and bounds for that area. Exhibit B is the annexation study that was just accepted and presented by Olson Associates. Exhibit C then, again, is a component of state statute, and this is the extension of city services to the annexed areas. In summary, what this is saying is that undeveloped areas adjacent to developed areas within city services, city utility services will be extended to annexed areas as a function of development of the undeveloped areas. Cost of these utility extensions will be a combination of developer cost, assessment per state statutes, and city costs according to city code. For developed or subdivided areas adjacent to cities, adjacent to city services, city utility extensions will be planned and extended according to city code and state statutes. For the extension of municipal utility services, these extensions may be requested by a petition of the majority of adjacent landowners, or city council may determine the extension is necessary and pass an ordinance following section 192401 of state statutes. Cities may also be extended as extension districts and assessed over a fixed period of time, or utilities may be extended as connection districts and the assessment paid in full at the time of connection to city utility. Both of those are discussed in state statutes as options. We may also choose to install utilities that are at the expense of our utility departments and then charge a connection fee according to city code to connect to those. Existing city-owned services to annexed areas will be maintained, upgraded, or replaced according to applicable city code. And also noting here that existing private mains would remain private. So just a note there, there are areas within the city where there are private water mains and private sewer mains. Most of those were installed probably 30, 40 years ago. But if some of those do exist outside the city limits and are a part of an area being annexed, they will remain private. Again, public safety and fire services, city police and fire department services will be available to newly annexed areas directly following the passing of the third reading of the annexation ordinance. And then the last exhibit, Exhibit D, is just showing our future land use map according to our 2017 comprehensive plan. So that's what the intent resolution is. And again, it sets up a series of meetings, ordinances going forward for the actual annexation process. We will tomorrow, if this passes, we will load a project up to the city project website with the annexation, the study, all of the individual area maps, as well as the copy of the letter that would be sent out to landowners. Some statistics on the annexation areas themselves. Again, there's 25 areas in here. One of the things that's done by Olson is a cost-benefit analysis of the annexation. And as we get into some questions and answers here, we'll bring Joe up to answer some of the more in-depth questions around that. The cost-benefit is done really to give us an idea as we go through the annexation of parcels, whether or not there's going to be a cost or a benefit to the annexation. Right now, I'm going to give you the number without the city airport, and then we'll discuss the city airport. Without the city airport, the cost to us on an annual basis is $1,194,866. The benefit would be $1,300,762, or a net benefit to the city of $105,896. If we bring in the airport itself is a fairly large negative number, primarily around a component of public service, and then the larger annexation of State Highway 81 down to the South Airport Road, as well as Old Highway 81 to the southern extents of the airport. And then there's a gravel road on the west side of the airport as well that would be annexed. With the airport included in there, it's a negative $254,000 in terms of cost-benefit ratio. Part of that on the public service side has to do with fire service and a little bit on police service. It is assuming that that whole area down there is sort of fully developed and falls within certain radiuses that we provide fire service and police service to. And really that's not something that's going to develop probably for many years, potentially decades, before we would get into a position where we would have to physically require new facilities and so forth down in that area, and then increase our staff to cover that additional area. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to kind of the questions and answers around the study and around the annexation. And yes, and I'll bring up a map here of the overall area so that you can see that. The other thing that I want to point out before I kind of turn it over is, and I honestly don't remember here, was there a motion and a second on this to open it up for conversation?
Yeah.
Well, I will need an amendment to the intent resolution. Area, as I mentioned, those areas in the resolution you have before you in the agenda pack, area 3.1 should be area 3.10. So I would need a motion to amend area 3.1 to 3.10. The legal description that's in the resolution is correct, and the map does correctly reflect that as well. The second, as part of that amendment, though, I also want to update Exhibit A to Exhibit A Revision 1. The airport was incorrectly shown as area 1.9 it was 1.9.1, that should be area 4.3. And there was an area up on Benjamin Avenue and 25th. It was incorrectly shown as area 1.9.2. Or I'm sorry, it was shown as area 3.5.1 and should be 1.9.2. So this Exhibit A Revision 1 does update that map. So that map is up before you, and I guess with that, I'll turn it over to questions.
So, Steve, I think we'll have an opportunity here, to zoom in and get a little bit more detailed on the areas that we're talking about. But first, for the purposes of discussion of this, annexation doesn't happen very often, right, in cities. And so I think it's important to do a little bit of education as to why we're looking at doing this, why we're considering this now, why we've put in multiple years of study and analysis on this. So that first question, why? Why does a city annex anything in the first place? And we can talk about this, but I think there's a couple reasons that it's important to facilitate growth, right? To keep a community viable and attractive, it needs to grow, just like any organization, a business or a nonprofit, if you will. But I think in terms of the community, it's important to do this when the time is necessary to pool resources in order to improve public services. Because we have a lot of areas that we're talking about right now that already are utilizing city services in some circumstances. And so this adjusts our boundaries to show that. I think secondly, you annex to make physical boundaries make sense. I think you could drive around a lot of parts of Norfolk today and you couldn't make sense of where our city limits are because we've outgrown the current boundaries, the physical limitations of the city. So that's another part of this. But before we get into a more detailed look of where we are proposing to annex or not, I wanted to have that broader discussion of why the annexation process is important to a community's growth and why we're doing this now. Is there anything else to add? Or
Yeah, I would add to that what you can see here in this image is that directly adjacent to our existing city limits are several already developed areas, and I'm not saying that all these areas are developed, but several of these areas are developed. Many of them have water, sewer, or at least one of those services. But as we continue to grow, without the annexation, as somebody comes in and wants to purchase land and develop, we wouldn't be able to annex them in as a function of that subdivision because they're not contiguous to us. And so one of the things this does is expands that footprint and brings in areas that are functioning to the major extent as a function of the city, so that again, as we grow, any new areas coming in would have adjacency and could be annexed.
Okay. And again, this process goes back to 2017, I think even earlier than that, when we initiated discussion about annexing certain areas of the town, and then we came to the conclusion that we needed to do a broad, comprehensive study of the entire community, and that effort started in earnest back in early 2017. So at this point, I think we'll open it up to any questions or comments from the council, unless you wanted to take a deeper dive, either you or Joe, in any of the particular areas.
Joe, anything you want to dive into? I don't think so. I think we're ready for questions.
Steve, on the map, there's some areas that are just whited out in those. I understand those are county industrial tracts. Maybe just a little background for the public to understand why we can't annex these county industrial tracts that we completely surround.
Well, we can't annex them because they are county industrial tracts. The history of these goes back quite a few years. I would say back into the 60s and maybe even earlier than that. I think as a function of trying to recruit industry into communities to help those communities grow, the county industrial tract system was created. Businesses came in here. It's currently Cardinal Health sits in one. There's some other properties right around there that are no longer functioning as an industrial tract, and that's some of the white dots that you'll see to the north of that Sherwood Road area, kind of along Bonita. There's no, there's not a great process for getting rid of those. Some of the other ones, Milk Specialties up there along Omaha, sits in an industrial tract. But being that they are, we cannot annex them.
Steve, this is available on what section of the city website?
This is currently just a function of the agenda packet tonight.
Okay, well, once passed.
Once passed, we will put this on our city projects website as a project. You'll see this map as the main icon to click onto. We'll have, we will load that with the intent resolution, this overall comprehensive map. We also have a series of smaller maps of each one of these areas that people could go into with a little deeper dive and see whether or not they're in that area. We've also taken those and added a more descriptive title to the document so that it's easier to figure out where in the community that location is. So we'll put those documents out there. Again, we'll put a copy of the letter that they're going to receive on there as well.
And that project spot on the website, is that under engineering, or is that right on the home page?
If you go right to the home page, there's a button that says City Projects. So
Okay.
it'll be available right there.
Thank you.
Just a comment, but looking at this map and some of the areas that are grayed out are almost surrounded by yellow, and it does seem like it kind of completes the map by adding those particular areas in here. Looks like that the study obviously was amended in 21, but it certainly looks like it's done a nice job of identifying those areas.
And Joe, I might use this moment to call you up. You referenced it earlier, but Olson assists communities across the state in annexation processes. This one you hinted at was maybe unfolded over a longer period of time than others you've been part of. And we did that, I think, purposefully. We wanted to take a comprehensive, holistic look at this. And so if you can maybe compare the process involved here as to other processes that you've seen cities take. Again, we want to stress that this was a somewhat painstaking labor of analysis in making sure that we tried to get this right.
Yeah, so the reason that this study took so long to get to its final completion was the methodology. So identifying areas is just one portion of that. But getting the methodology so everybody feels comfortable within that methodology, and that's why we kept it the same between what we did and accepted in 19 and what we accepted tonight, because that methodology was a partnership between city staff, myself and my Olson team with experience in looking at annexations across the state and in other states, and just really nailing down what we want to look at in a consistent manner. And that process wasn't taken lightly. That process was detailed. I remember having conversations with Chief and the rest of the staff about, do we do it on land base or we do it on population? And if we do it on land base, here's what that would show. If we do it on population, this is what this would show. And coming to a consensus of exactly what we wanted to do. Because if you do it on land mass, the results show something completely different, both negative and positive. And if you do it on population, same thing. So showing that consistency across the study, whether it be land mass or population, was hugely important to this study. So everything's consistent, the methodology, the formulas, everything's consistent in it. And we started basically taking our knowledge and from scratch and looking at it specifically as it regards to Norfolk. So.
Thank you, Joe, that's helpful. And while there's a deep dive in the analysis and the numbers and the data based on the principles of consistency and congruency, as you stated, there's also some common sense to this too, right? Because I think some of the direction you received early on was to focus on the low-hanging fruit, those areas of Norfolk that are presumably and intuitively already part of the city. And so that's what we tried to focus on here. Would you say that's accurate?
Exactly.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Joe while we have him here?
I will just mention, Steve and I had a conversation regarding the airport, but just to use that as an example. So the airport seems to be kind of out of whack. I mean, it's owned by the city, owned by the Norfolk Airport Authority. There's a lot of roads that surround it, so that's one of the big upticks. But also within that is the fire protection. So within that's just over 200,000. This was one of those key focused areas. So you can draw a radius around each fire station and talk about response times from each of those fire stations. And it was decided internally that 2.5 miles was kind of the critical boundary, the radius around it. So having said that, the airport falls outside of that 2.5 miles. But just because there's a cost, increased cost of fire protection, that doesn't necessarily mean that the city of Norfolk is going to go build a new fire station just to serve that property. I mean, the property is city owned. There's a couple businesses on there, but there's not that many structures out there. So that becomes a future endeavor to talk about, where you put future fire stations, or even if you need a fire station, maybe you can extend that to 3 miles or 3.5 miles to get those radiuses around that. But that's a future conversation. But during the process study, we discovered those. I mean, we went out a huge amount and narrowed it down to a small amount until we came to that 2.5 radius around each station. So that's why that one's kind of out of whack. So.
Thank you, Joe.
Yep.
Okay, I think a reminder of the process might be helpful now. This is, if the council moves forward with the intent resolution, there would be another series of public meetings surrounding this process. And Steve and Andy, just as a reminder, if this should pass tonight, public hearing notices will be done for the next planning commission meeting, correct? And property owners in the affected areas would be notified by mail. And I think the distinction that I was thinking of earlier was we wanted to make sure that mail got to those people, so we agreed to do that, or wanted to do that by certified mail versus regular mail. Is that correct? Right? That was part of the discussion anyway.
Do you want to take this or me? It was talked about initially, and then we found that state statute that says U.S. regular mail would suffice, and the only certified mail noticing we would need to do is to any SID.
Okay.
Yes, and the clarification there comes from the fact that we found that throughout our conversations, which have spanned the last several years, that single statute involving the mail is in a different section of statutes. Everything for annexation is in 16, that was in 19. We didn't find that until later, but what happened was we wanted to make sure that no matter what, regardless of statute, we sent out that notification to every single landowner. So that from day one has been a priority. We were going to do the certified mail, and then only in the last few months did we discern that we found the statutory requirement, and so that's included as,
Okay,
as a
so
function
regardless,
of this.
in addition to the public hearing notice.
Yes, everybody will
that
be getting that so that
notified
they
by
have
mail.
the opportunity to participate in the upcoming public hearings before Planning Commission and City Council.
Okay, okay. All right.
Steve, can you give me a little clarification on 2.4? Exactly how far south that goes off Omaha Avenue?
Area 2.4, so Pinkelman's is already annexed out there on the west side of Victory Road, so it would go up to Pinkelman's. Yeah, so so about a year and a half ago or so, we there was a developer came in that had bought some land over there, so we annexed a chunk just directly west of Victory Road, south of 275, and at the same time we annexed to the east side of the levee. So this annex, area 2.4, would just go up to that parcel.
I apologize, but I just realized that I will have a conflict of interest on this, and I will have to abstain.
Sorry for that.
Anyone else while we're at it? Okay, all right. So process, maybe we can go back up to that process sheet, Steve. And then I think you had asked for or noted some needs for technical amendments to the intent resolution, and maybe a reminder of those.
I'll remind you on those. So within the intent resolution, area noted as area 3.1 needs to be redacted to area 3.10. And the Exhibit A needs to be replaced with Exhibit A Revision 1.
Exhibit A to
Exhibit A Revision 1.
Exhibit A revision. Okay. Okay.
Make that now?
Motion including those two reference changes.
Yeah. I'll make a motion to amend 3.1 to read 3.10 and as well as Exhibit A to show Exhibit A Revision 1.
Second that.
Okay. Motion and a second. Any further discussion, council, or comments? Okay. Hearing none, please vote.
Voting in the affirmative, Granquist, Merrill, Webelhouse, Jackson, Hildebrand, abstaining, Arns, Murin, and Clausen. Motion carries.
Okay. So that takes us to item number 30 on the council agenda. I would look for a motion.
Oh, that was just the amendment. So
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, the amendment. I got ahead of myself. We're still at the underlying resolution number 2021-28, the amended version of resolution number 2021-28. So, any further discussion on the underlying motion? Okay. Hearing none, please vote.
Voting in the affirmative, Granquist, Merrill, Webelhouse, Jackson, Hildebrand, abstaining, Arns, Clausen, and Murin. Resolution 2021-28 is adopted.
Okay. Now that I think the rest of you gentlemen can join us again. Item number 30. Would look for a motion to consider approval to award a contract to Bauer Underground Incorporated of Norfolk, Nebraska for the Benjamin Avenue overhead to underground utility relocation project for an amount of $798,904.10.
I make that motion, Your Honor, to approve.
Second.
Motion and second. For some background on this, again, Steve Ramus, please.
Mayor and Council, this is a contract to provide conduit that would be used for undergrounding the electrical distribution system on Benjamin Avenue from 1st to 13th. As we own the distribution system, NPPD operates that for us. It is our expense to cover both the relocation of the distribution as well as the underground conduit required for that project. And so this is the contract for the underground conduit portion of the Benjamin Avenue utility relocates as they relate to NPPD's subtransmission and distribution. We did only receive one bid on this project. That is not unusual for us as a function of having a fairly large underground contractor right here locally. This is a pretty big job with a fairly tight time frame on it. NPPD's estimate just for the NPPD portion was $750,000, and I was estimating about $150,000 for the conduit required for our city communications system that also hangs over there. So in general, we got a good bid under engineer's estimate, and I would answer any questions you have.
Steve, does this mean that will the poles be gone that are along the north side?
It's what I call the tweener poles will be gone. So we've got the higher sub-T poles, and then in between each sub-T pole is one tweener pole for the distribution system. Those will be gone, as well as the underlying distribution system and communication system.
It'll just be the very top.
It'll
ones
just
will
be
still
that,
there.
that upper subtransmission system.
Okay. Thank you.
Steve, does this 800,000 come out of the general funds?
No, this comes out of our city highway allocation funds.
Perfect, thanks.
And Steve, with your experience, you feel that this is in line with the project I read here, is that correct?
Yes, certainly the engineer's estimate on this was reflective of the current bid conditions. There are issues related to the resins used in conduits right now, and so, we think we got a pretty good bid here.
Okay, thank you.
Besides the conduit for the power, this also includes conduit for the city's fiber?
Correct.
All right.
Any further questions or discussion, council? Hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Item 31 would entertain a motion to consider approval of amendment number 1 to the engineering services contract with SCS Engineers for Phase 3 construction phase services for the transfer station site improvements project for an amount not to exceed $96,814.60.
I'll make the motion.
Motion and second, and for some background on this, Rob Mercer, Solid Waste Director.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is for a portion of the construction phase services supplied by the design engineer of SCS. They will supply an oversight and interpretation of the architectural and design plans during construction. The amount, the $96,000, amounts to 2.2% of the total $4.3 million project. The actual construction phase services will come to you at a later date. We'll probably bundle that with a local engineer with several other projects going on in the city. Any questions?
Thank you, Rob. Any questions? Any questions? No?
That was not part of the initial bid that when we originally let that out?
Correct. When we bring a consultant on for design, usually that is just design services. Not knowing exactly what's going to be entailed in the complete design, we hold any design services for an amendment. Or I'm sorry, we hold construction services for a future design amendment, a future contract amendment.
Okay.
as Rob indicated, this contract here is specific with SCS, and so they'll be doing shop drawing reviews related to the architectural components of the project, weigh scale, and scale house is a function of just general construction administration. We'll be bringing another contract to you for that.
Steve, is SCS on other parts of this project, or would
SCR was the design team.
SCR?
Yeah.
Guess I was just under the assumption when we bid this out originally that it was all these costs were already put into the project.
Yeah, so this is our engineering services. This isn't the construction contract.
Okay.
Does that? So we've awarded a contract to Perry Reed for $4.35 million for construction. This is as a function of that, the design engineer needs to review shop drawings and so forth associated with that, just to make sure that what they're intending to build into the project meets the design specifications for the project.
So are you looking at total engineering costs as part of the overall project to be in the 10% range?
We're about 10% in for bid, for just design services right now. I think we're $430,000 or so for design services. We're looking within the original budget for the project. We had construction administration services penciled in there at about 8%, 7 to 8%. Like Rod mentioned, this is somewhere around 2.3% or so. We would anticipate another contract for an additional 2.5% for just overall site engineering, testing, density testing, contract administration, that type of stuff.
So when it's all said and done, you still assume that's going to be somewhere in the 8% range?
I think I'm budgeting 2.25% for construction administration services, $225,000. So that's going to be around 5%, a little under 5% or so.
Okay.
Just a quick question, Steve. Explain why we wouldn't have that as one package. I think that's maybe where some of this conversation is. Why wouldn't
between SCS and this other
or construction services along with the engineering services, or maybe it's a alternate, I guess. Why?
Yeah. So when we hire an engineer to do a design, we do an initial contract with them for design services, and usually within that contract, construction administration is TBD or to be determined at a later date. We could put a number on that at the same time, but that number is probably going to be higher than waiting until we get through design and know what we're actually going to be building and how much construction administration service we're going to need against that project. So we wait until we get to that point. Once we start to get the projects bid, we know what we're building, and we'll engage the design team in a construction administration services amendment. In this particular case, we have a desire with Benjamin Avenue going under construction, the river restoration at Johnson's Park, the First Street Bridge, the 275 trail undercrossing. All of those are going to be managed by one consultant. JEO locally is the design team on that. And so to us, it makes sense to add the overall construction administration component for the transfer station to their contract for construction administration services on all these other projects. Typically, if we had multiple consultants doing each one of those, or a different consultant on each one of those, we'd probably be paying in the range of 8 to 10% in construction administration services, just depending on the scale of the project. So here, by bringing these all together, we're pretty confident. In fact, I have a contract, a master service agreement contract on my desk with JEO that defines their maximum fee as 5%.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions or discussion, council? If none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Item 32, would look for a motion to consider approval of a professional services consultant agreement with Manelli Wagner and Associates Incorporated for the asphaltic overlays 2021 project for an amount of $96,720.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Motion and second. And Steve, once again, some background on this item, please.
Mayor and Council, so what you have before you is a very similar agreement to the last agenda item here. This is the Construction Administration Services Agreement for Manelli Wagner to manage the construction services and testing related to the asphalt overlay project. It'll kick off here towards the end of September. Their original contract for design was $56,385. They've given us, or we've kind of negotiated, the contract for construction services of $96,720. Unlike their design agreement, which was a lump sum agreement, this is an hourly, and so we would pay hourly based on the services being received, testing being done. In conversation with them, we both recognize that this is probably a little bit higher than I would like to personally see here, but we don't have a lot of control over the contractor or the weather, and those are the two things that can cause increased costs for construction services during a project. Overall, I would tell you, I think this is about a 3-week project. If we have good weather, it's going to be 3 weeks. They're going to be in, they're going to be out. We would probably see actual fees at about 70% of this number.
And Steve, just as a reminder, what is the total projected cost of the entire program itself?
We're about, with the construction costs, we're right about 1.3, 1.35.
Okay.
1,350,000.
We don't have a schedule on that, right? As
The
of yet.
schedule is they are currently mobilizing their plant into Pierce, and they've got about 3 weeks of work to do at Pierce, and then from there they'll mobilize their equipment here. And they thought they would be fully moved into Norfolk towards the 3rd week of September to start work.
So this still could be completed this fall yet?
3rd week of September. Yes, this week, this work would all be done. All that asphalt work would be done this year.
Okay, thank you.
Do they give a report of actual man hours and days? How do we keep track of man hours?
We do. Most of our consultants use a product called Deltec, and so we get an hourly, an invoice that shows us who we worked on the project, how many hours they worked on the project, and generally what they were doing on the project.
Any other questions?
Just since you mentioned the project, the paving, I understand you held off on some of that special paint that was going on earlier this season.
For the crosswalks?
Yeah, well, you think they'll be able to finish that this fall, or will that be
Yes.
extended till next
Yes.
spring?
No, we'll get that in.
All right, thank you.
We'll send you some pictures.
I'll be back.
Okay, all right. Insurance.
Not up here anymore.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Item 33, would look for a motion to consider approval of a contract with J.H. Hesby Company Incorporated of Norfolk, Nebraska for the Norfolk Police Department parking lot expansion 2021 project for an amount of $170,626.77.
So moved, Your Honor.
Motion and second, and once again, Steve, some background on this project, please.
Mayor and Council, Chief Miller's going to join me here. Just in case you've got
It's
some
just
questions for him.
Force of habit.
So, yeah, so
You want me to start with the introduction?
why don't you go right ahead?
This is a project, Mayor and City Council, this is a project that we started looking at years ago. We've always had struggles with our parking lot, just being too small as we've grown over the years. And as we were looking at it, the city engineering department helped us design a potential parking addition. The city currently owns the grassy area to the east of our existing parking lot, so there's no expense in acquiring land. We already have the land. And as we talked to the codes department, we're trying to analyze the need for additional parking. Based on standards, we should have roughly 45 parking stalls plus our city vehicles. And so we should have about 70 parking stalls with our current size of our building. We have 60. So just off the bat, we're already 10 stalls short. So what that means is we have employees that will park across the street, different parking lots at certain times of the day. You'll see in your packet, I put a couple of pictures, pictures worth 1,000 words. That shows our parking area during one of our training days that happens several times a month, that we literally pack the parking lot. So as we were looking at this, we were looking at adding onto our parking lot. Well, then we started discussing our regional dispatch center and possible future expansions. So as part of this, I had conversations with our architects that we're working with for our space needs assessment to make sure that if we do an addition to the parking lot now, it's in conjunction with a possible future expansion, so don't have to redo anything. And by adding onto our parking lot, we can add 38 stalls, which would put us, we're roughly 60 now, so we'd be getting close to 100 stalls. And we need 70, so we would have some extra. Now, as the course of our possible future expansions, we would lose 15 to 20 of those. But yet, we would still have enough. With the projections, we should have about 85 parking stalls in the future. This would give us 90 for a 30-year projection. As I mentioned, the city engineers worked on putting together the plans, went out to bid. The bid came in at, I believe it was just over $205,000. It was the only bid, so Steve was able to meet with a contractor and negotiate that down. Some additional things that the city will do on our own to save some expenses, and that brought it down to the price that's before you, the $170,000 price tag for JS Hespe. Anything you wanted to add?
No. Well, looks pretty good. Just, Chief Miller mentioned about 38 stalls there. It's about $5,000 a stall, so if you do the math on that, you get somewhere up around $190,000. So, just that rough math tells me that the bids we got were pretty good, or the bid we got was a pretty good bid. What we carved out was the parking lot lighting. The bases will go in as a function of the Hespe's project, and then we will use city forces to come back and reset and relamp the parking lot lighting.
And we're reusing light fixtures. We have some identical fixtures to what we have from other city projects that were no longer being used, so they're laying on the ground. We'll repurpose what we can to save money where we can.
Does this take into account the additional employees that we'll have?
Yes.
Obviously with dispatch growing, police force may grow.
Yes. When we did our space needs assessment with the architects for not just our dispatch center but possible future expansions, we went through every piece of this, and we're expecting that it'll be adequate to handle our future expansion for up to 30 years out. We didn't just look at what we need today, we looked at our 30-year projections. Now, if we end up adding on later on, we'll lose a few parking stalls, we know that. But we will still be able to, with the end of the project, we might have to add a couple more stalls in a couple locations once we lose those, but there is enough space to get adequate parking for 30 years out.
With the additional parking stalls, is there a requirement then, maybe Val can answer that, for any additional landscaping that's required for the additional 38 stalls?
I don't know about the requirements for the landscaping.
No, it's actually in C2 zoning, and so there are no, C2 zoning is really downtown zoning, so you can go edge edge to edge, property line to property line.
But adding 38 concrete stalls doesn't require any additional landscaping
No.
within that hard surface?
Not according to code.
Is that a consideration for the expansion, given shading or screening?
It's not part of this project, you know, we're planning on trying to maintain all the trees and the grass areas that we can. We have trees along the boulevard. There'll be grass areas between the parking stalls, I mean, as part of the function of the design. We also have to consider the safety consideration. You don't want things that people can hide behind when people are going out to their parking lots. And, you know, with a law enforcement facility, it's something we have to think about. Down the road, we're planning for the possibility of putting like a black decorative fence around it. That's not part of this project, but we want to make sure that it's aesthetically pleasing because of its location. And we want to maintain as much green space as we can. However, I mean, we're also limited, so we'll do the best we can with the space that we have.
I would encourage that, given that it's public property and we have the ability, even though it may not be required by code, we have the ability to do the best we can aesthetically.
Absolutely.
Steve, do you have a number in mind, once the lighting is installed and all of that, what do you think the final number will be?
Oh, I don't think we're gonna spend more than, you know, just include, if you were to include our labor cost,
Yeah.
which would just be absorbed by our budgets, but, we've gotta buy the new heads, the new LED heads. I'd say 180,000, you know, another 10,000 on this would cover the LED heads and our labor to set all that and run the conductor to connect everything.
Okay, thank you.
What's the condition of the existing parking lot?
The majority of it is fine. There's a few patches that have some concerns. Most of them are around the drains that are there, and as a function of this, we're gonna have to open those up and redirect the drainage to the east instead of to the west. So those panels, some of those panels will get replaced anyway as part of this.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Chief. No further discussion? Please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Okay, item number 34. I would look for a motion to consider acceptance of the resignation of Councilmember Fred Webelhouse as Ward 4 representative.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion and second, and
Regrettably.
Councilman, I will cede the floor to you to explain your resignation.
Okay. Mr. Mayor and the rest of the council, and I've my place of employment, our office is headquartered out of Lincoln, and fortunately I had the opportunity to accept a promotion, and based on that, I will have to relocate to Lincoln. I had never thought that would happen, but you know, we never know what's going to come down the road towards us. So, for the betterment of my family and to betterment of my career, I'll have to go to Lincoln. Kind of regret that I won't be able to finish out the term here, but the work with the council, as stated in my letter, has been enjoyable. It's been humbling to work for the citizens of the city of Norfolk, and I always, every meeting, every action, I try to remember that's who we work for, the citizens of the city of Norfolk. And I think this short term that I've been on the council, I think we've done a lot of big projects. There's been some small things in the ward that I think were pleasant, and we were able to, I was able to help facilitate. So with that, that's kind of where we're at, Mr. Mayor, and on those notes, I'll be abstaining for the rest of the meeting.
Okay.
If you want me to step down, I can.
That's okay. Councilman, thank you very much for your dedication and service to the citizens of Norfolk. We've appreciated your diligence and pragmatism and professionalism and hard work in representing constituents in Ward 4. And yeah, certainly mixed emotions as we're sad to see you go, but very much understand the opportunity that was presented to you. And I think we'll still get to see you once in a while in your new position with Lorm. So your promotion with Lorm. So with that, unless there's any further discussion among the council, or these guys want to grill you with questions, we can proceed with a vote unless there's any other comment or discussion.
I'd just like to thank Fred for being my partner in Ward 4. I think we worked well together. When constituents had questions or comments, they contacted either one of us, and then they were able to get the resolution through the staff. So I want to appreciate Fred working with you. It's been fun.
Same here.
I miss you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman. All right. If no further discussion, please vote.
Voting in the affirmative, Grandquist, Arns, Merrill, Murin, Jackson, Clausen, Hildebrand, abstaining, Webelhouse. Motion carries.
Okay. And related, item number 35, I would look for a motion to consider approval to call a special city council meeting on Thursday, August 12th, 2021 at 12 p.m. to fill the city council seat vacancy in Ward 4 as a result of the resignation of Fred Webelhouse.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, motion second. So, as part of the process for appointing a new council member, we give public notice for the process. So, for persons interested in filling Ward 4 council vacancy, you must be from Ward 4, which is the southeast quadrant of the city. You must submit the following to the city administrator's office no later than 4:30 p.m. on August 9th, 2021. That's a written statement of intention to be considered and a personal resume. And thirdly, the mayor and council are entitled to interview interested persons and candidates. And lastly, the special council meeting scheduled for August 12th, 2021 for the mayor to submit the name of qualified elector to fill the vacancy. So that is the process we have in place. I know there's been some coverage of this in the media, so we will at this time begin accepting any a statement of intent and personal resumes from interested parties in Ward 4. So with that, unless there are any questions or comments about the process, we can vote on approval to call the special city council meeting. Hearing no questions or comments, please vote.
All council members voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Okay, and that concludes this meeting of the Norfolk City Council. Yes. Can we do that?